Now, your health, your safety. This is ABC7 News.
Good afternoon, I'm Kristen Z. Welcome to our daily special called Getting Answers. We're asking experts your question every day at 3 o'clock right here to get answers for you in real time. So today we have ABC7 News contributor and San Francisco Chronicle insider Phil Matier and Governor Newsom's former communications director when he was mayor and current CEO of the Press Shop, Nathan Ballard. Good morning, gentlemen. Actually, make that good afternoon. Time flies when you're having fun.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, it is a big day for California as Governor Gavin Newsom says stage 2 of reopening begins this Friday. So before we dive into what that means for us, let's go over this. The governor said guidelines and details will be publicly released Thursday, but essentially many lower risk retail businesses can open Friday with modifications. And he said other counties, hinting at more rural counties, can expand reopening to restaurants, but stressed that all state-required health criteria has to be met. So here's what falls under retail, along with manufacturing. We're talking about clothing, for example, bookstores, music, toys, sporting goods stores, florists. All will be curbside pickup only, and once they make the required modifications, they can reopen for business as early as Friday. Now, here's the reopening roadmap report card that Governor Newsom says California is, in fact, on schedule for all of these criteria. So let's look at these. Stability of hospitalizations. PPE inventory, that's the personal protection equipment, healthcare surge capacity, testing capacity, contact tracing capacity, public health guidance in place. All right, so joining us now to dissect and unpack all of this is, once again, we have Phil and we have Nate. So on Friday, guys, the governor said we were days away, not weeks, from further reopening measures. So he kind of did hint at this, but who's surprised by the speed and the scope of the announcement today? Phil?
Well, let's go back even a couple of weeks when the governor was saying it's going to be months, not weeks. And then it went from months to weeks, and then Friday it went to just a couple of days, folks. Trust me, I'm going to be back on Monday. We're going to have this thing rolling. The fact is, Governor Gavin Newsom has been leading the parade right now, but in order to lead the parade in California, you have to have the band follow you. And in the last week, the band has decided to take its own direction. It's not just talking about people showing up on beaches, too many people. We're talking about rural counties saying, look, we're going to go our own direction. We're not the same as Los Angeles and the Bay Area. And the governor's accommodating that. He is trying to continue on as the leader, trying to set the course, but even by his own guidelines, I'm not sure how much we're different between now and last week, except for the pressure is on, not for the virus, but for the shutdown. And that's an economic thing, not necessarily a health thing.
Yeah, Nate, is that caving or is that being responsive and flexible?
No, I think Phil raises a really good point in that he's got to be the leader for the whole state. And obviously, when you have some of the rural counties that are very sparsely populated and they haven't had any cases at all, they're going to want to open up restaurants and resume life as normal. And obviously, we had some difficulty, rocky road down at the Orange County beaches the last couple of weekends, and so the people really want to get out. They really want to be out, in the spring sunshine, and the governor has to sort of calibrate what's good for the public health and also, how much Californians can stand at this point. And I think by taking these baby steps on Friday, I think it's really smart. And I think it's especially smart of him to be opening the florists for delivery and takeout right before Mother's Day.
I was just going to say that one a lot of people were probably hoping for. But I got to ask you, right? He's currently getting a little bit of criticism from the left and the right. The left saying, hey, we don't even have enough contact tracing in place, and you're starting to open flower shops and toy stores. And then the right, of course, is saying you've been keeping us closed for too long unnecessarily. So how does he come out of this looking, not only looking winning, but actually winning, where everybody agrees in the end that he did the right thing?
Right. I think nobody can argue that he hasn't been among the most aggressive governors in the country on the lockdown. But also, he's got the most diverse state in the country, with a mixture of rural and urban and just all kinds of diversity. And he's got to be the governor for everyone. And I think that's the Gavin Newsom that we're seeing right now, who's really listening to his constituents. He's still got his eye on the ball, the public health ball, and he's making sure that all these decisions are driven by data. But at the same time, he understands that people are restless and they want to go and they want to be able to pick up some flowers or go to the toy store. And so he's doing it in a way with a sort of a drive-through strategy that is not going to compromise public health.
You know, Nate and I have both known the governor for some time. I've covered him. Nate has worked with him. Gavin Newsom is a lone wolf. That's how he was as mayor, and that is how he's been politically. He's his own guy, and sometimes that can be a detriment. He doesn't necessarily consult with other people before he makes decisions, whether it's gay marriage or the lockdown and how we're going to get out of it. His announcement, for example, that schools should maybe start up in the summer, in July, he didn't vet that through the educators and the school districts, and they sort of reacted like, I don't know how we're going to do that. So he has a habit of sort of getting out there and then hoping that the people are going to follow. In this case, they're not always doing it. He's entering into an area where you're right. Some people are going to say, wait a minute, we're really not ready to open. Other people says we should have opened a while ago. He's doing that toggle on the switch, trying to keep things going and keep going ahead. Let's not forget, other states are opening. People are going to say, well, if they are, why aren't us? But we're entering the area of, and this is a very tough one for someone like Gavin Newsom, who's a governor, is what is the acceptable risk? Everything going forward is going to come at a risk. If you shut everything down, you're risk prevention. You're saying, okay, we are going to do our best to make sure that no one gets sick and no one hopefully dies. We're going to go into an area now where people are going to continue to get sick. People are still going to go to the hospital. And sadly, they're going to continue to be fatals. But what is the acceptable one for going forward and opening back the economy and not risking even bigger problems, including state and local budgets that are just getting ready to tank? Nate?
Yeah, look, Phil, I can't argue with you in the sense that Gavin Newsom has an innate sense of when to move forward and when to recalibrate. Like last weekend, he recalibrated on the Orange County beaches, and I think that was the right decision. But I think moving forward, he's got to see there is going to be more and more pressure to open up this state as other states open up, and as the more sparsely populated regions of this state want to open up more. And he's got to do it very carefully because history will already remember him as the governor who shut down the state early and flattened the curve on coronavirus. The question is, will history remember him also as the governor who was able to keep coronavirus under control while the state opened up? And that remains to be seen.
I want to talk about the flexibility that he's giving to the local counties to make their own decision. He said, in fact, he mentioned the Bay Area, that if you want it to be stricter than the state guidelines, you certainly can be. You can be slower to reopen. And then he's also giving leeway to the more rural counties. Like if you think it's, okay to open your restaurants, if you follow these health criteria and the supervisors approve and you do it with social distancing, maybe that's okay. So that's a baby step, right, from where he used to be with restaurants being in stage 3. But I wanted to ask you, is this flexibility going to, I guess, put local politicians and leaders under tremendous pressure, right? Because if you were to say, I'm going to take stricter measures, how is that going to make you look? So how does that pressure work out in terms of what our local leaders here in the Bay Area will actually do?
You know, Kristen, that's a very, very good point. And as an example, statewide, it was okay to do construction. It was considered an essential industry. Here in the Bay Area, they took that and said, oh, no, actually not all construction. Government construction is essential. Affordable housing is essential and will allow you to do that if it's within the right parameters. Full rate market housing, a high rise for people that are going to pay market value? No, that's not essential. You need to stay closed. An office building? No, that's not essential. You need to stay closed. So what we had already see that difference. And that's a very good point, because while the governor is saying this is the direction where I'd like to go, it's going to be up not even to the supervisors and the mayors locally, it's going to be up to these health officials that a lot of people don't know to make the final call on that. And I will tell you that there's already some tension within the Bay Area, for example, on that construction one. The Mayor Libby Schaaf wanted to be all housing. She couldn't get that way. So there's already some kind of tensions going on about what this is going to translate to in the local level, because the governor made it very clear whoever's got the stricter guidelines should sort of rule.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to take a short break on the air, but we'll continue this conversation over on our live stream platforms, including Facebook Live. So you're welcome to join us over there right now, and we'll be right back. All right, gentlemen, I want to tackle what happened to that unified front that they had 7 weeks ago, right? Now it does seem like, Phil, you brought up the point of counties and executives wanting to go their own way in certain issues. You know, for example, I'll just bring up tennis as an example. You have Marin County and Cocoa County saying, yeah, that's okay. And then you have San Francisco and San Mateo saying, no, it's not okay. And I think this is causing so much confusion for Bay Area residents. And they're wondering what happened to that one unified voice. What led to these fractures?
Right. I mean, I think that you're sort of raising 2 points. One is local control, and the other is the perception of fairness. And I think that Gavin Newsom, as a former mayor and a former supervisor and a former parking and traffic commissioner, understands that that local governments have to be making their own decisions, or this won't work. Mm-hmm. They've got to have some latitude to make their own decisions. But on the other hand, if certain essential workers are only getting the daycare, if tennis is open in one county and not open in another county, if there's a perception of unfairness, then this all breaks down. And so I think that the counties have been sort of forming federations, like the Bay Area counties did to begin with. And I think to have regions acting more coherently and in unison is probably the best way to move forward, because of course our needs here in the Bay Area are much different than the needs of constituents up in Redding or down in San Diego.
Yeah, I know. I think the problem is when you get into, well, my needs here in San Mateo County, they're not different from the guy in Marin County. That's where you start to get, you know, people.
Exactly.
All right, we're going back on air in like 10 seconds, so hang on to that thought.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2.
All right, we are back with the ABC7 News contributor Phil Matier and CEO of the PR agency, The Press Shop, Nathan Baller, who used to work for Governor Newsom when he was Mayor Newsom. So we are digesting what he said today about moving into stage 2 of the reopening starting as early as this Friday. That includes a lot of manufacturing, a lot of retail. Guys, I know this is not necessarily your area, but I know you have deep understanding of what the policy is guided by. So I want to pose some of these questions to you about the issue of fairness, which we were discussing over on Facebook Live. People are wondering why, for example, you know, how is a retailer like Macy's more essential than a hairdresser, for example, who can wear a mask? Or why is dog grooming not listed under what's allowed next because they're not in close contact with humans? Where does that fall, you guys?
It really is confusing, and as Nate brought up earlier, it's a question of fairness. As you said, fairness. I've been talking with business people, for example, dog grooming, okay? You can go to a pet store and buy food, but you can't go to dog grooming. You can order a Starbucks or a Pete's Coffee and pick it up, but you can't go to a local store and pick something up from their door. And the business people are saying, where's the fairness there? What makes one construction site different than the other? What makes one manufacturing essential and another one not? What we had here was an attempt to shut down the state, to have people stay at home. And what they would ideally have done is said everybody has to stay at home. But they couldn't do that. So they started making these exceptions in there. And it sort of got really squiggly from the get-go. If you're a store that sells liquor, you have to stay closed. But if you sell liquor and food, you get to stay open. Mm-hmm. So the fairness of it, Krista, was not accounted for. It was just done. And now they're trying to figure it out going forward.
Well, yeah, and one other thing that I'm thinking about is here in the Bay Area, we care a lot about our moms and pops, right? And at this time, the big box stores that, you know, there's overlap between what they carry. They've been allowed to keep selling their curtains or things, but not the mom and pop. So is this going to have the effect of devastating our mom and pops when this is all done?
So I think that when we started down this shutdown at the outset, it was done as a public health measure. It would have taken a year or more to craft legislation, to create policy that would be truly fair. And so it had to be done swiftly in order to flatten the curve. And nobody said that the exceptions that were carved out for essential workers or essential businesses were 100% fair. However, it is now time for us to look at reopening in a way that is fair. that balances the big box retail with the mom and pop small businesses that are suffering right now. Because something like 75% of the businesses in California have 10 or fewer employees, and they're suffering. And so, it is now time for us to make decisions that are not just about flattening the curve, but also about reopening the economy in a safe way that that shows our sense of fairness and justice.
It's kind of interesting because Nate was bringing out a point that it would have taken a year to craft the legislation about how to do an effective and fair shutdown. And we probably wouldn't have agreed at the end of that either. Reopening is also tricky. And for example, it's interesting to note that it was just a little while ago that the governor appointed an 80-plus member commission to study how we would reopen in the new economy in California and what would be in effect and how it would work. And it was going to be headed by Tom Steyer. And now we're hearing, oh, we're going to be opening by Friday. I don't think we've heard anything from that commission. That's not the way life works. The life works, and as Nate knows it, when you're in these positions and you're an executive and you have to make them, you make them fast. And the fairness catches up later. And what you're hoping is that the results outshine whatever flaws there were going through, and everybody remembers how it turned out rather than the process of going through it.
Right. It does feel like we were at that point. Go ahead, Nate.
And the reality of it is if you've got a commission and it's headed by Tom Steyer, and they issue some guidelines, and we follow the guidelines, and they don't work, really it comes back to Governor Newsom, and he's the one that would be blamed if things go wrong. So he's got to be the one making these decisions because he's the one that's sitting in the chair and is being held to account for everything that happens next.
Yeah, and he's got a pretty good read on the pulse of the people. I think just from all the videos that we've seen from people outdoors, at Dolores Park in San Francisco or the beaches, there's the sense that people are going to start to do what they want to do regardless. So may as well do it in a somewhat organized way with, some rules in place to ensure safety to the degree possible. I want to move on to this, which is, guys, you're both sort of like futurists, right? And I want you to look into the future and see, when things go back to normal, is it going to be a different kind of normal in California in the sense that, there were a lot of progressive measures that were in place, like the push for Medicare for everybody, undocumented immigrants, greater child care. Are these things going to continue, like housing for the homeless, reform to the criminal justice system, right? Addressing the digital divide. Are we going back to normal ever, or are we going in a different direction now completely?
Well, a lot of that's going to depend on money. If you want to have a universal health care or something close to it, it costs money. If you want to have universal child care, it costs money. If you want to put the homeless in hotels, that costs money. And one of the things that I'm looking into the crystal ball, and I'm not alone on this because there's these reports sitting there on it saying that that's one thing that we're going to be in very short supply on in the state level and on the local level. We're going to look for the feds to help out with a lot of the viral costs. But remember, we're losing a tremendous amount of sales tax. San Francisco isn't booking conventions till the summer at the earliest. And that is a huge hit. All of this transit, everything like that is going to be lined up. It is going to be different. I'm not sure it's going to be the trajectory for a lot of programs because we don't have the money to launch them. That's going to be the bottom line. So
these lofty, progressive sort of ideals that cost a lot of money, I mean, Nate, you also expect them to be put on hold at this point?
I wouldn't say necessarily on hold, but let's look to 2008 and 2009 when we had a global recession, and Gavin Newsom was leading the city of San Francisco as mayor. And what he had to do, what he had to do primarily with a shrinking budget was pave the streets, make sure there are enough police officers on the street, and perform the basic functions of government. That didn't stop him from pursuing progressive goals, but that didn't leave him with a lot of walking around money to spend on new progressive legislation that might cost a lot of money. So I think, Phil is right. In the next 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, we're going to be rebuilding the economy, and we've got to have all the basics in place before we're going to do just this wild first in the nation stuff that we're used to seeing in California.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to take a short break on the air and then be back with more of the conversation. In the meantime, we can continue to discuss these ideas over on our live streams, including Facebook Live, so feel free to join us there right now.
We are in commercial break.
All right, folks, hope you're enjoying this conversation. I'm learning a lot, chatting with Phil Matier and also Nate Ballard. A lot of questions from our viewers. I want to get through a few of them. And we were talking about fairness and what's allowed to operate and under what circumstances. I'm getting a lot of questions about in-home daycares. And before, I think, daycare was only available to essential workers, but now as we kind of toss aside that label of essential workers, I think it's becoming anyone who's allowed to work. But then you have people who are also wondering, well, why is my child not eligible? You're calling my work not important. It's important to me. I want to make a living. Gentlemen, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think the bottom line is the Gavin said today was, you know, check around websites, see what's available, see what slots are open, and see if you can get into one.
It's hard.
It's hard. And that's also going to be one of the questions going forward. Like, for example, if we do open the schools in July, that's one thing. If we don't, then what are the parents going to do? If there's staggered days at school, if one of your children goes Monday and Wednesday, and then Tuesday and Thursday is at home, and the other one goes Tuesday and Thursday and is Monday and Wednesday at home, what do you do as parents? How do you go back to work? What's your, you know, what your child care isn't just going to be for preschool, it could be extending all the way up into high school. We don't know how that's going to work. That's going to be up for the locals. But that's a very complex one and one of fairness, too.
Yep. All right. 20 seconds before we come back on air. So, Nate, do you have a quick thought?
Yeah, I think that what Phil is talking about is that none of this has ever been contemplated before. We've never shut down the economy like this before. And we've never played out what it would look like to reopen. And so there's just a lot of hard work in front of us.
Yep. All right. We're coming back on air on ABC7, so hang on, folks.
5, 4, 3.
All right, we're back with ABC7 News contributor Phil Matier and Newsom's former communications director Nate Ballard to talk about moving into stage 2 of the reopening of California starting this Friday, as the governor just announced. I want to ask you, one area where the governor has been asked by many people what's going on here, and he seems to be taking a bit of a hit, is the inability of a lot of people to get through to EDD to file for their unemployment benefits or even for the self-employed, the new PUA. And this is coming at a time when 4 million people have been added to the unemployment rolls in California, and they're trying to get money and they can't. Talk about the impact and how important it is for the governor to fix this one quickly.
It's important. I don't know if he can. If we have to remember that it was just a couple of months ago that we were seeing reports that the DMV couldn't handle its load. And they had a years of warning about that. You know, whether it is getting unemployment because it's swamped with record numbers or it's getting tested. The fact of the matter is you can't snap your fingers and, as much as the governor wants to talk about it, get a bunch of people or workers transferred and doing these new jobs and getting these things processed. It just doesn't happen. That's why it's called a flood that hits you. And whether it's unemployment claims or questions of children's grades or getting a building permit, getting classified to reopen, all of these things are going to take tracking. He's talking about we're going to track the virus. We're going to have an army of trackers. Well, you just don't get that overnight. Even in World War II, it took months to get something going, and we don't have that time.
I think everything, if you look at these priorities on a scale of 1 to 10, it's really hard to look at unemployment as getting those checks as anything other than a 10. It's really hard to look at reopening the schools as anything other than a 10. It's really hard to look at getting the retail back open as anything other than a 10. What we have here is, instead of a governor that's dealing with some issues that are at a 1 or 2 priority or 4 or 5 priority, almost every single one of these issues on his desk is a 10 in terms of its importance to the state and getting our economy back going again. So, you know, if the checks are slow, yes, that's a problem, but he's also got 99 other problems.
Right, and that's going to be bring about a big question about what we talked about a little earlier coming out of this. One of the things we haven't talked about much is California going to continue with the regulations it has? Is the minimum wage going to stay where it is? Are restaurants going to be able to open? Are they going to have to half open? Can they survive that? Are the rules that follow going into manufacturing and such, are they doable in a way, and are they enforceable in a way? Or how much are we just going to have to say, We're going to have to open this up and hope for the best and have to pull back and learn as we go. Because as much as we like plans or things like that, as Nate will know from working in government, you know, a plan is like a window. It's only good until somebody throws a rock through it, and then it's a bunch of shards and you don't know what to do.
Yep. Yeah, that's an important thing to address for sure. One thing I want to ask you about is, you know, Governor Newsom hasn't always been on the same page as the federal government in terms of the Trump administration. But to what extent is he going to have to really play ball here, even on some thornier issues, sanctuary cities, et cetera, immigration issues, because of the fact that the state is realistically going to need federal support and federal money? I mean, we're going to be billions in the hole, and we have all these cuts to make. We need federal money. So to what extent are we going to have to be more responsive to the federal government? So
Gavin Newsom used to be able to take pot shots at Donald Trump whenever he felt like it. And those days are gone. Right now, we've got to do everything we can to survive. And so he's got to pick and choose his battles. And so if there are massive priorities that matter to millions of Californians, he has to work with the federal government. He has no other choice. And it's not time to be, you know, tweeting insults about Donald Trump when he's got to sit down the next day and get millions and millions of dollars to help reopen this state. So I think that, you know, those, for now, the sort of political gamesmanship that we've seen before between governors and Donald Trump have to be put on pause in order for us all to work together.
Yeah. All right. That's an interesting point. Nate, thank you very much. Phil, thank you very much. We're going to take a short break. And as a reminder, Phil Mateer's column appears in the San Francisco Chronicle Wednesdays and Sundays. Definitely worth your time. We're going to take this break on air, but continue this conversation. We'll wrap it up over on our live streams, including Facebook Live right now.
We're in commercial break.
All right. And do we have time for? Oh, we do. Okay. 2 minutes. So you guys want to fight over who wants to start? A minute apiece. Most important point that you want Californians to remember and look for in terms of what we can expect from the governor in the week ahead.
Well, the governor is going to have... Go ahead, Nate.
Well, I just say I'd be interested in Phil's thoughts on this. One of the things that's going to be happening on Friday is people are going to be getting into their cars and essentially commencing a drive-through culture where everything depends on getting in your car, driving somewhere, having somebody deliver it to you on the curb, or maybe picking it up like you do a coffee right now from a drive-through window. I mean, and with so many political leaders in California always urging us to get out of our cars, this may be a semi-permanent change in the culture where all of a sudden, you know, the birthplace of In-N-Out Burger is the birthplace of the next drive-through,
Nate.
you know, spectacular retail, right?
Take it a step further. For the last 20 years, we've been telling everybody, get out of their car, take mass transit, don't do this, use recycled bags, no paper cups. We've had this whole culture of sort of save the planet, bless our little hearts, and now it's like, well, you have no choice but to get in the car. As a matter of fact, I recommend you get in the car because I can't guarantee you a bus. And that disposable, reusable bag, forget about it. You have to use a paper bag, and I don't want to see anything but paper cups. As a matter of fact, I went to the store the other day and I went to one thing and I said, no, thanks, I don't need a bag. And they said, no, you need a bag to get out of here.
Right.
It's required now.
And then what about high density housing?
Exactly.
There might be a shift in thinking there too. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. Always fun and insightful talking to both of you. I'm going back on air and we'll do this again soon sometime.
Take care.
Thanks.
10 seconds.
All right, a few seconds and then we're coming back on ABC7 News.
4, 3, 2.
Are we doing a recap? Do we have time? Okay. Welcome back. Let's give you a quick recap of what Governor Newsom announced today. The stage 2 of reopening will begin Friday. So the governor said guidelines and modifications will be publicly released on Thursday. Retail businesses can open Friday, and he added other counties, mostly the rural counties, can expand reopening to restaurants, but stressed that all state-required criteria has to be met. And here's what falls under retail, that definition, along with manufacturing: clothing, bookstores, music, toys, sporting goods stores, florists, just in time for Mother's Day. All will be curbside pickup only, and once they make the required modifications, they can reopen as early as Friday. We look to get more information from the governor on Thursday because a lot of people are already asking questions like, how do you do clothes shopping but make it curbside? You know, obviously you can't go in and look at it and try it on, so how does that work? Our dressing room's going to be closed. So much more ahead in the days ahead. Thank Thank you so much for joining us today on this new interactive show called Getting Answers. We will be here every single day at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, ABC7news.com, and the ABC7 News app. We're also watching for questions that weren't answered, saving them for next time. World News Tonight is next. All right, folks, thank you for joining us on Facebook today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Certainly that was a lot to digest. It's been real. See you again soon.